I'll start with you, Mr Walker.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Rob Walker. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Regional Aviation Association of Australia.
Thank you. And I'll now go to FlyPelican. Mr Hawley, are you there? Can you hear? I think you're on mute. It's a bit like the Kit Kat commercial, isn't it? Mr Hawley, can you hear us? No, we can't hear you. Sorry. You've got a technical problem at your end, or one of us has got a technical. No, we're all good here. Mr Hawley?
Here we go.
That's it. Okay, fire away.
So I'm Marty Hawley, the CEO of FlyPelican Airlines.
All right, thank you. Mr Walker, do you wish to make a brief opening statement before we go to questions?
If I could, please.
Yes.
That would be great. Thank you. And obviously, good morning to senators. Let me start by saying thank you to all of you for your continued support of regional aviation industry in Australia. Obviously, it's a challenging business to be in, and the support that's provided is, as I say, greatly appreciated. The RAAA, as we're better known, is over 40 years old and has a successful history of actively representing the interests of regional aviation businesses across Australia. We currently have 125 member organisations, including regional airlines, aircraft maintenance organisations, flight training organisations, regional airports, and a broad range of supporting businesses and stakeholders. Specifically, 3 regional airline members fly into and out of Sydney on a scheduled basis and will be affected by this legislation. They're Link Airways, Rex Airlines and, as you'll be hearing from, FlyPelican. Importantly, these airlines also fly to and from a large number of regional centres that support the regional communities that live there. Today I'd like to highlight 4 key points about the legislation. First, the RAAA welcomes the review of the operations at Sydney Airport, and our members appreciate that regional aviation continues to be recognised as an integral part of the operations at that airport. Second, the RAAA supports the legislation but notes that more detail is yet to come in subordinate regulations that have been drafted. This will need to be managed carefully to ensure regulatory solutions are fair, practical and truly outcome-based. Thirdly, the RAAA notes that the government is seeking reforms and greater transparency of the operation of the slot scheme. We are also committed to ensure that the scheme remains fair and transparent. It's important to note that airlines are only one part of the formula for safe operations at Sydney Airport, and the others include things such as air traffic control, the airport's own infrastructure and, of course, weather. All can impact an airline's on-time performance. And finally, the RAAA encourages the government to explore all avenues to increase the capacity at Sydney Airport. The current 80 movement cap, including the rolling 15-minute average, does not work and hasn't always operated effectively. The demand management reforms need to include every opportunity to increase capacity. Reforms like the increase to 85 movements for a 2-hour recovery period are a good start, but the reforms could go further to ensure any flight delays due to disruption can be cleared as quickly as possible. Senators, as I know you know from your own experiences in representing your vast regional electoral constituencies, regional aviation is vitally important to all Australians. Whilst some may think that operations at Sydney Airport don't affect other parts of Australia, that is not true. The flow-on effect of a major delay at Sydney Airport can impact the regional aviation network for hours and in some instances for days. It's vitally important that we all get these reforms right. Thank you once again for your support, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, Mr Walker. Mr Hawley, do you have an opening statement?
Chair, no, I don't have an opening statement, but happy to answer any questions.
Look, thank you. I might just kick off with a couple. My questions are to both of you, so please feel free. And I just want you to talk us through your experience accessing Sydney Airport. Mr Walker, if you want to kick off, because you're here in front of us.
No, thanks, Chair. Speaking in general terms, from the association's members' perspective, access has been reasonable. Has been reasonable,
right.
And has been that way for quite some time. Airports Coordination Australia, as the slot manager, have effectively and very fairly managed the system for over 20 years. And in the instances of members like Rex and also Link Airways, and I'll let Marty obviously speak on behalf of FlyPelican, we've had access to slots when they're required. Importantly, we fortunate that we have the regional ring fence in place.
Yep.
And any legislative change, and my understanding is it's not included in this, that there should be no change to the regional ring fencing. That Permanent Regional Service Series, the PSRR, is basically our guarantee and has been our guarantee that we have fair and reasonable access. Obviously, operations change, airlines do come and go, but I'm not aware of any instance where one of our operators hasn't been able to gain access to Sydney Airport at or near the slots that they have preference for, and that's largely due to the historical significance of the ring fencing.
Well, that's a bit of good news. That's good. Mr Hawley, and I just declare I have flown Pelican. So your experiences.
Yeah, good to have you on board. Look, our experience over the last few years, slot access has gotten a lot easier for regional airlines. I think post-COVID, with regional flights, not many has operated as previously. In previous times before that, we did have difficulty at times, which did affect some of the services that we operated to regional towns as well. But since then, I'll echo the statement that the last few years, slot access has been reasonable.
So to you both, and it's good to hear, but how will this bill assist regional airlines?
Sorry, Senator, in terms of this legislation?
Yeah, this legislation.
I think there's multiple parts to the legislation. I think it's been long overdue that the slot system is actually looked at more closely. The system has been running for a long time, goes right back to 1997 with the new parallel runway. The system in place, if you look back then, the airlines that were flying included an airline called Ansett. So there hasn't been a lot of change, and there hasn't been a lot of change, and obviously acknowledging the political imperatives that sit around the 80 cap. From an RAAA's perspective, I think it deserves to be looked at more closely. To, like anything, make sure that the system's still working, to actually understand how the system is working, because in terms of the legislation, it's going to enshrine requirements for greater reporting, and that is a good thing. The only caveat from the association's perspective on that is our operators aren't large airlines. We don't have the capacity to build complicated or involved IT systems. So we would be strongly advocating for reporting that is fit for purpose for the nature of the operation. If you're a regional operator who's only flying a handful of flights in and out of Sydney as opposed to some of the larger numbers we've just been hearing about, we'd like to make sure that there is no onerous requirement put on those operators in terms of reporting. I think the great opportunity here as well, and I'm probably a little bit altruistic here, is that actually there is now recognition that major delays at Sydney Airport do have big impacts. Whilst we very much welcome the lift to 85 and that 2-hour recovery period, there is definitely potential for that airport in those situations to work harder and to clear more aircraft. Maybe it's a case of this is an initial first step, and then we can validate and prove that the system's working. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think there are definitely some positives here, and also in terms of the public perception of aviation, transparency is always good, and the opportunity to, as I say, understand what the system's doing and how it's actually working is a good thing.
Yes, it's very topical in the nation at the moment, isn't it?
Most definitely.
What about you, Mr Hawley? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the main thing from the legislation that we're really excited to see is the recovery period, with looking at making the movement caps increased during, weather or other events into Sydney Airport. It can have a really detrimental effect on regional operations, especially when you're only operating to some regional destinations a few times a week or once or twice a day. Trying to recover from any disrupt can be very difficult, and it might not just delay the passengers for a day, but end up affecting our network for the next couple of days. We don't have flight crews or aircraft based at all these different ports, so, and not having, lots of slots, it's hard to combine aircraft, etc., and flights. So that's something that we're really pleased to see. We would love to see that increase from 85 to the maximum amount to be able to get rid of any sort of delays through the system. The other thing, I guess, we'd love to see some sort of priority for regional slots as well, just due to the nature that the effect it has on our networks and the recovery period for that.
Well, you wouldn't get an argument from this committee, Mr Hawley, because we spend quite a fair bit of time in regional Australia, and we know how important aviation is to the regions, and particularly when they're on time and flying. Just before I pass on, Mr Walker, Mr Hawley, the media are in the room. Do you have any problem being photographed? No, that's fine. Okay. Mr Hawley, you're good? Yeah, well, you're on public record. That's great. Yeah. And just my last one before I go to Senator Mackenzie. So we've now got the bill in front of the House. Is there a matter of urgency we get this passed?
It's entirely up to yourselves and the government. I mean,
no, I know it is, but I'm saying now you can say get on with it, let's get it through and get it moving, or you can say no, take your time and let the Greens run a crazy agenda, whatever. I don't know. From
the association's point of view, this has been a very slow burn, and we're keen to see the legislation move expeditiously. Linked to that, we are actively engaging with the department. They've already set up a number of meetings. Effectively working group to work through some of those subordinate regulations that have been drafted. We are comfortable with the way things are going. We do have some concerns with some of the potential within those regulations, and as an example of that would be the penalties that may be applied for a flight cancellation. To Marty's point, for a regional operator, they don't have spare aircraft sitting around. Yeah. Generally, if they cancel a flight, it is because they have a serious issue with an aircraft or with their operation, and it is literally cancellation is the last resort. And I think what we would be looking for on behalf of the members is a pragmatic approach to any penalty scheme that may be applied. There was some media just yesterday around, potential of up to $20,000 for a cancelled flight. Well, that sort of scale would actually effectively make some regional operations completely unviable. I'm not saying we're looking for special dispensation, but it's the devil can be in the detail, and that's something we're working with the department on closely over the next 2 weeks. But rounding up that answer, yes, let's keep things moving with the legislation. Mr Hawley, any last comments before I give you a plug?
No, echo those comments. Just consultation on those sorts of fees, etc. I think going forwards is very important.
Thanks, Mr Hawley. And I do not own shares in FlyPelican, but I did FlyPelican once, and they give you a can of bubble beer as you get on. How good is that? Thank you very much, Mr Hawley. Thanks, Mr Walker.
Take that as a comment.
I don't have any conflict of interest. That's a comment.
And they don't have a chairman's lounge, but I love the work that Pelican does, and I'd like you to get into Albury, please. That would be fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate you being before us today. In the Minister's statement, she did actually, in February, make some commentary around the changes to the regional ring fence as part of this legislation. Are they positive changes as far as you can ascertain, or are they changes that you need to, you support or not?
Certainly. And to your point around the changes, my understanding is that they're looking at a narrowing of the peak periods that would be available to regional operators under the ring fence. So rather than the 6 to 11 time slot, I think it is reducing that from not till after 7 a.m. And in the evening to tighten from, I think it's from 5 p.m. through to 7 p.m. instead of going later.
What will be the impact of that?
For our operators at the moment, there is minimal impact. We're comfortable with what's proposed. The tightening, if it does free up other slots for other operators and obviously other competition, then that's a good thing. As the members' current operations are, there would be a minimal impact on those changes, and we don't have an issue with them at this point in time.
And it won't restrict future growth or new entrants, in your view?
Not as it currently stands, probably a little bit more, I suppose, forward-looking. It's challenging in regional aviation. One of the biggest challenges our members have are ageing fleets. And the ability to refresh their fleets going forward. I would see that for regional aviation we're going to be in a period of consolidation now to really try and do the best we can with what we've got, and obviously also then look to lobby government for support going forward. You can look at the long-term statistics, and the number of regional airlines has reduced. The number of regional operators that are in charter business has reduced, and the number of regional airports that are actually active and being used has reduced as well. Those numbers aren't going the right way, so anything that opens up the pipeline with support for regional aviation is greatly welcomed.
Thank you. So in terms of, there's been a lot of commentary, and Australians of the mind, that there's a lack of competition in our domestic aviation sector. Is that something you'd both agree?
Probably not for me to comment more broadly on the larger airlines. Within our own...
the sector generally?
The sector generally.
Is it competitive?
It is highly competitive.
At a regional level? And
a regional level as well.
Despite Rex going into administration of Bonza?
I quite often, as I describe it, straddle the barbed wire fence. I have members on both sides that are competing often in the same regional sectors. Sectors like Melbourne to King Island is highly competitive. There's sectors in Queensland are highly competitive as well. So there is one of the strengths of the RAAA is the camaraderie and the shared purpose for regional aviation that they all share, but they are also fierce competitors amongst themselves.
And that doesn't stop you being able to advocate. Mr Hawley, can I just ask you, do you think the bill's measures for enforcing slot usage will help to level the playing field for regional airlines?
Senator, I guess in regards to slots into Sydney for what we do, I can't really comment on levelling the playing field. I mean, we don't compete with anyone on the services that we operate on. And as for compliance, look, I think that when we get more detail, I think we'll be able to have a bit more of an idea on that.
So your customers don't want to fly into Sydney in peak times? They're a different type of customer?
Look, some of our routes, yes, definitely. I mean, some of our regional services we fly only once a day in the middle of the day.
Is that because you have to? Or would you fly at different times if you could?
Look, we don't have to, but we choose to. We also, we have a lot of people flying to communities where there's mining, etc. So they need to fly from elsewhere in the country first in the morning to then connect into a midday flight. Flying into peak times at the moment, as I said earlier, access for regional services at the moment is okay. Previously we did have issues with that pre-COVID, which did have some detrimental effects to some of the places that we flew to.
I don't have any further questions.
You done? Sorry? Okay. Are there any other senators out on board? Okay, great, fantastic. We're back on time. Mr Hawley, thank you very much for availing yourself today. Mr Walker, thank you so much.